is the Requiem Metal Podcast, episode 69, Thorns.
You just heard Aerie Descent by Thorns on the Requiem Metal Podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jason. And we are visiting the Nordic wastelands of industrial post-apocalyptic black metal.
And very possibly one of the bands that contributed to the second wave of black metal as we know it.
Yeah, Thorns is boy, they're throwing us for a loop, that's for sure, as we're kind of doing some of this research.
Yeah, I threw kind of out the analogy that they're to black metal what Repulsion was to death metal, as far as like being so prolific but yet having, one studio record out.
Yeah, they're like the big progenitors of like this, sound in a way.
Yeah.
Second generation sound.
Well, and even I probably pronouncing his name wrong, Snorre or Snorre.
Yeah.
I mean, he contributed riffs to Mysteriis Dom Sathanas, probably one of the biggest black metal records as far as most influential, and everybody has that.
And notorious, yeah. In terms of...
I mean, he was in prison for 8 years for being an accomplice when he really was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, with Count Grishnak.
Yeah.
During the Euronymous murder, so I don't know, there's probably a lot of you out there who are new maybe to metal. If you're new to metal in the last 4 or 5 years, there's a good chance you don't know what Thorns is.
Well, even if you're not, they're never given a whole lot of...
No, although I would say that one solo record that he put out in 2001 garnered a lot of attention.
But I'm wondering how much people really knew the history of that.
Oh, yeah, and just thought, this is a cool record.
Yeah.
Because that was
Satyricon. That was kind of the time that, Red Harvest and similar things like that were coming out, but...
Yeah, for sure. And I mean... The song there, Aerie Descent, to trace the lineage of that song is very difficult. We did our best. I mean, the first time that I think that shows up on a recording that you could actually buy was on the Necropolis Nordic metal tribute to Euronymous.
Yeah, everything else was just, it was just fan-produced tapes and stuff.
Yeah, demos and stuff. It was originally, where it surfaced demo-wise was on the Tronderton demo, which was put out in 1992.
Recorded at a liberal arts college.
Yeah, in Norway. The Tronderton College, right, of music or something, or art school. So, and you can tell if you, go back and listen to that song again. I think it begs a couple listens because there's just a lot of off-kiltering things happening from a compositional standpoint, very non-traditional kind of black metal things from that point, right?
Well, it's something you'd almost think that you're going to have a blast beat with.
Yeah.
And it's just this slow plotting thing.
And
it has this, very dissection-esque.
Well, there's that riff in the middle that sounds just like the opening tune Into the Fathomless Depths from Stormy Light's Bane, which is, in hindsight, kind of ironic because we're probably going to be doing a dissection show in the next couple weeks here. So, well,
that's good for our research and whatnot. But that's a similar riff. It's kind of indicative of the whole scene. That's almost a bridging riff between second generation black metal and the Gothenburg style.
Yeah.
Or later, second generation Swedish death metal style.
Yeah, the Nagelfire, Dissection, Dawn kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's such an eerie tune, the bass thump that sort of starts it off. I was kind of comparing this song to it's like the city slang of black metal. It's like the song that's just been around in so many different versions. Mm-hmm. City slang is a Sonic's Rendezvous tune, which a lot of people probably don't know much about Sonic's Rendezvous other than he was in MC5. But that song kind of became
he's married to Patti Smith.
Yeah, that's true.
They both have the same last name.
Yeah, before they got married.
Which is kind of, Smith, that's a pretty common name.
But it's kind of different, but that was sort of the theme song for kind of Detroit garage rock in the 70s and 80s and stuff, and it kind of became an anthem more than
and it's similar to this. It was basically unheard of.
Yeah, and it wasn't
nobody had it except if you had bootleg tapes or live shows.
I think it was one of the only Sonic songs that ever came out on a record, but it was a 7-inch maybe or something until they finally put that
it was on a 12-inch, but it was 12-inch, it was on 30, it was not 33, 78.
Okay,
because it's got another song on the other side. I've got a reproduction of that.
Yeah, so but anyways, not to get too into the Detroit thing, but Aerie Descent, like I said, shows up in a lot of different places, but it's hard to know what influence this had. You read a lot about how influential Thorns was, and then you look at the people that have wanted to work with him. The fact that he was involved in Mayhem as a second guitarist at a certain point, the fact that when he finally puts a solo record together, Hellhammer's drumming with him, Satyr is co-writing and singing a lot of these songs. So,
and I've read in interviews that Snorre was actually pretty instrumental in, if not coming up with Satyricon riffs, like playing back and forth with him and having some kind of like maybe not necessarily a producer credit, but some kind of arrangement credit or something like that.
Are you talking even in the early days, or are you talking
this is
Rebel
I think Rebel Extravaganza through I believe even Agent Nero, if I'm not mistaken. Okay.
So
I know they've had a kind of a tight relationship, and they've got really similar aesthetics as well. Sure.
And in a way, like, you know, this guy could be responsible for, you know, part of the turn that Satyricon took, you know, in the direction that they went.
Well, I think you had Mayhem, they were kind of their own thing, largely, you know, punk influenced, if nothing else. And then you've got Darkthrone and Burzum that are kind of their own thing.
Yeah.
And then diverging off that, I think, is Thorns, and then we get Satyricon, Emperor, and Enslaved, and all this other weird offshoot.
Well, the thing also that you hear in Aerie Descent is obviously the keyboards, you know, and I mean, almost the funeral keyboards, like at the end, which are kind of harken to the opening track, Shivering Voice of the Ghost
from Gehenna
for Spell. And we were racking our brains. We were doing as much research as we possibly can using the internet and pulling CDs out. We pulled Burzum out and Old Emperors and Enslaved and Satyricons to date it, to see who was using keyboard before this.
Yeah.
In this sort of capacity. I mean, we mentioned, you know, Hammerheart from Bathory and Twilight of the Gods and some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's never used as
but that wasn't like black metal. You know, by that point it was Viking kind of stuff. And for the life of us, if you know, let us know. Like, did somebody beat Thorns to the punch? Because this stuff,
as far as black metal goes,
black metal and
we're not talking
integrated use of keyboard in a certain sense. Because, you know, for my money, from what I can tell, Aerie Descent is probably the first prominent use of well integrated keyboard.
Here we
in black
go.
Metal.
Merciful Fate.
If depending on what you consider them,
not necessarily. I mean, I know Merciful Fate's a large influence on black metal.
That's true
to a lot of degree, not necessarily vocally, but as far as compositionally, I know Isan is a huge fan of King Diamond, he's a huge influence on.
Well, even Frost. I mean, Frost did some keyboard stuff, but I guess I'm thinking in the context of modern black metal.
No, we couldn't really. I'm just trying to think of like where that kind of lineage started, and outside of, you know, Celtic Frost, and then, you know, King Diamond through Merciful Fate or something. I can't really think of many other people that are using it.
Yeah. So it's you know, definitely an interesting argument to throw out there in a controversial way to the public, is to say, you know, look, you know, what do you guys think out there? Is there, you know, are we giving this guy too much credit, you know, in a way? But and he's almost like this guy who's always like behind the scenes in all these different places that are like such key areas.
Yeah, he reminds me of, he's like the Nicky Anderson of black metal.
Yeah.
With how like, hey dude, you know, Fred SB from Dismember, here's a sweet riff, you know, you might want to try this one out.
Yeah.
And just with how he was kind of like the guy, and
he was just always there.
He was more, I guess he was more of a Euronymous as far as like being out there though. Snorri has always seemed like he's like, you know, kind of hidden in the shadows someplace.
Yeah, he didn't want
interesting
the spotlight
guy.
on him.
Yeah.
I mean, we were just talking about whether or not you would ever see Thorns live, and I mean, our gut instinct tells us no. They're like Darkthrone, they're studio band. I mean, the guy has put out one full release record in 20 years.
But he's had like some ambient stuff as well.
Oh, has he?
Yeah, with the dude from Third and the Mortal, I believe. I couldn't tell you the years, but I just looked that up.
No doubt. That's cool.
But I could see him more like in a soundtrack kind of capacity, more so than ripping out metal.
We'll get to that in later on the show when we get into a solo record, because there's a 2-piece collective piece of music about 15 minutes long that we'll be playing. That's really like the soundtrack to the apocalypse in some sense. So. But anyways, Aerie Descent, the more I listen to that song, the more I like it. It keeps me interested, whereas a lot of like some of that older black metal stuff, sometimes if you've heard it, it just kind of loses. I don't know.
Well, it's one of those songs that's had, you know, it was at its embryonic stage, but it had some kind of spark there that it almost, you know, begs to have reinterpretations of it over and over and over again.
Which we will get into a reinterpretation coming up in the next set. So where we're going to go is kind of show you the kind of origins of the Thorns sound. we're going to go to the two demos, the Tronderton demo again, which we talked about, with a tune called Funeral Marches to the Grave, which we'll talk about in just a second, and then an instrumental tune from an entirely instrumental demo from 91 called the Grimmerk demo. Grimmerk.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a demo. Look on Metal Encyclopedia. You'll see how it's spelled.
And that tune's cool because it's instrumental, but it also like just has this like kind of, it has the industrial grind to it still that's going to become like the sound of Thorns in the later 90s. And one of the things you point out is the prominence of the bass.
It's
in
not
all
distorted.
of this stuff, and it's clean.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's breaking a lot of rules before the rules were even set, and that's why I think I like about this guy. You know, like he's right there at the beginning of black metal as we know it and think about it.
The second generation.
And he really, you know, he's just doing whatever he wants, and nobody was calling him out on it. In fact, I think a lot of people were probably looking at him and kind of using that as influence.
Yeah.
I mean, without a doubt, Satyricon, obviously, as you already mentioned, but I'd beg to differ, you know, that like Arcturus and Emperor, in terms of the shifts that Emperor made away from, you know, what they were doing in their demo days. I mean, that was clearly not coming from Mayhem. You know, I mean, Mayhem and Darkthrone were doing straightforward black metal. Somebody had to be building that avant-garde part of black metal and the keyboards and the more experimental compositional parts.
Yeah, not being afraid to bring in electronics.
Yeah, and definitely you can hear it in some of this sort of stuff. So we're going to hear Funeral Marches to the Grave, which you were talking about the tremolo stuff kind of going on at the end of this tune.
Yeah, he's doing that really weird... where he'll be doing, you know, the typical, you know, Swedish death metal tremulous, super fast style picking.
Yeah.
And instead of like just holding a note, he's like sliding up and down the string, almost like making it sound like it's out of tune or something. Yeah. Like really interesting technique.
It's kind of uncomfortable, but in a cool way, like unsettling in a certain sense. And then, like we already talked about Fall being just sort of a short instrumental tune. And then we're going to kind of round things with a reinterpretation of Aerie Descent, which comes from 1998. The Thorns vs. Emperor record. So it might sound familiar, but it'll be slightly different. So enjoy Funeral Marches to the Grave.
force that never will and never could be found. Rose, it was crimson in color, drawn whale with coming form that cripples and blind your ways that never comes again. And
was the 1998 version of Aerie Descent from the Thorns versus Emperor record, and then we had Fall and Funeral Marches to the Grave before that. What are some of the differences in that Thorns versus Emperor version?
I'm definitely not a musician, but I really try to pick this stuff out a lot, and from whatever documentaries or other musicians, and it seems like he's almost tuning everything sharp, like whatever his guitar tuning is. I'm guessing it's probably like C. It's definitely not D. Tuning everything sharp, and then really going high in the gain. So every time he does any kind of it holds a chord out, it almost sounds like a harmonic.
Okay.
Like if you hold your finger over the little dots on the neck, whatever the hell those are called, you can get a harmonic off of each one of those. It kind of has that feel, but he's using that and then playing almost counter to the drum beat, like holding out those notes a little bit longer to make it that much more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think.
Because somehow, he takes a song that's in its original incarnation 5 minutes, doesn't really add new movements really or anything, except at the end it sort of gets ambient there a little bit longer for probably about a minute, but he somehow adds 3.5 minutes to the song. I mean, it's almost like it's kind of a really interesting reinterpretation, because like you said, he's holding all these notes out, and it almost like every time you're holding that note, you add all those together, and it just sort of spreads the song out a little bit more, in a weird sort of way.
It definitely makes it more eerie.
And now you're starting to see the kind of the post-apocalyptic, I guess, what I would call like industrial black metal, razor sharp kind of sound coming out. When did Rebel Extravaganza come out from Satyricon? That was 98. Was it 98 or 99?
Positive.
Okay. Yeah, it was somewhere in that same time period as the Thorns versus Emperor record, which I think he must have just been getting out of prison around this time.
Yeah.
Had to.
Because he was in for 8 years.
Yeah, 8 years, so... Still, he didn't go into 90 unless he was recording stuff in prison. Because when's Euronymous taken out? 92?
Well, Norwegian prisons
8 years
kind of,
but maybe 2 years off from good behavior.
Well, you can get out to do stuff too.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's
maybe
still,
got out.
That's what socialism's about, guys. It's good stuff. It's not this crap that they're
not just healthcare. It's prisoners getting to make great black metal records, and really look at all the prisoners we have in the United States. We can make some killer.
Yeah, because I think because Bart Faust was in for like 15 years.
Yeah, but he wasn't.
No, he was.
Was he really?
Yeah, because when he got out, he did that Scum record.
That's when he did the Scum with the Turbo Negro and the dude from
douche
Amen.
from Amen. Yeah. But yeah, I think he was in for his full sentence.
Okay. Huh. So interesting.
And what was Nightside Eclipse? When was that recorded?
Well, it was recorded in 93, but didn't get put out till 95 because of Sam Alt's church burning shit. So Bard went in 93? I think so.
Let's say? Yeah. 93 and got out in probably 2002? 3?
Yeah, but that wasn't 15 years.
No, maybe he didn't go for the full time.
Yeah.
Our math is bad.
We're trying to restructure the whole Norwegian prison system here, so we really should have Lords of Chaos open and be like cross-referencing things. But
I wish Lords of Chaos wasn't so much played like a soap opera, and it was a little bit more factual. But
it'd be nice to have just like a timeline. This is when this.
Yeah, like if it was put up together like Swedish death metal was. I'd like something that's a little less, a little more objective than that.
But I guess the appeal of black metal is so sensational. Yeah. I mean, that's why you get those kind of teeny boppers kind of drawn like, mosquitoes to a light or something, or moss.
Well, there's really never been any, musical faction that's been so controversial as far as seriously like killing and murder and
confrontation.
Yeah, it
harkens back. It's like taking what happened in England and like with the punk scene in the late 70s with Sid and Nancy and Johnny Rotten and just all the crazy swearing and breaking stuff on television and like
making it real,
amping it to a whole new level. Yeah,
actually having real terror there. Yeah. Even though it was just a bunch of kids, but still, I mean, real terror outside of some dude throwing a television out a window. It's like
Well, I remember Kuhn telling me he had like nightmares about. This is back like freshman or sophomore year in high school, because when I bought the De Mysteriis album used, he like saw the picture of Euronymous on the back or whatever, and he goes, "I've had dreams about that guy." And he was like really freaked out, you know. So those guys, because of the face paint and everything, I mean, they added an element of like, who are these people? You know, worship the devil and do all this weird stuff. And unfortunately, Snorri got mixed up.
It's got this exactly same appeal as like as rap music. Yeah. I mean, with all the deaths, and I mean, that's the only other genre of music I can compare that with as far as the drama. Yeah. But I guess it's not as mainstream accessible.
And look at all the, you know, documentaries and movies that have been done about Tupac and Notorious B.I.G. and I mean all that stuff, because it was a, you know, pretty dramatic thing. But you know, but speaking of Notorious B.I.G., you know, let's get back to Thorns. But yeah, you know, so you're hearing more drawn out kind of things, and I don't know. So whether or not he recorded this in or out of prison, I can't confirm at this point. But
and if it's anything like the prison system over here, who knows when the hell he went in?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, but Thorns versus Emperor was that was a release both Mark and I kind of skipped, which is odd.
It's got a crap cover.
Yeah, it's a horrible cover.
But that's actually...
Did Season of Mist put that out?
Moonfog put it out.
Moonfog did? Okay, yeah. I couldn't remember. It was some...
I mean, it looked like a Seasons of Mist like cover for their aesthetic back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely that was around the time. Well, actually, like Dark Throne was on Moonfog at that point, and Cold. Oh yeah. KHOLD one.
Yep.
It was, I mean, because it was a pretty interesting burgeoning label at that point. I don't know what the hell they're doing now, but. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't get that. That was just kind of stupid.
Yeah, I saw it so many times, and I even had friends.
I just saw it on Amazon last year, and it was about like $11, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll get it at some point."
It's out of print now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dang it!
It's probably been out of print for a long time, but like people are picking the thing up, and the price is going through the roof.
So if you got a copy of it, hang on to it, or
send it to us if you want. I'll give you my PO box.
There you go. Yeah, we'll take a great
donation.
We'll take one. But now, after that, this is sort of his coming out party, I guess, in a way, his comeback, you know, 98, and this sort of sets in motion, you know, he's going to work alongside.
Well, that was actually the point of the Thorns versus Emperor, was to reintroduce people to Thorns, which I honestly, I had no idea who the hell they were at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And right before kind of like the big, 2001 record.
Sure. And by this point, we're really just talking about Snorri, right? Because Faust had played drums on some of the stuff we heard in that last set, Bard Faust.
Yeah, he only played with them till like
I think 92. So there's just that demo stuff, and so I think he's the only like guy who is even part of Thorns.
Yeah, I think he's pretty much the mastermind behind it.
So, and he kind of becomes a one-man band on his solo record, which we're going to kind of jump into. And this solo record, self-titled, was put out on Moonfog in 2001. So we're talking about a guy who was recording his demos in 89, 90, 91.
Well, and this was actually recorded from 98 to 2000.
He spent 3 years on this record.
Yeah.
That makes sense, because he hasn't done a follow-up yet.
Yeah, he plays bass. I think he does a little bit of vocals, not very much, but bass, guitars, electronics. Yeah. And then we've got Hellhammer on drums, Satyricon, Satyr von Graven on vocals, and then this other dude named that I forget.
I'm trying to remember what the other guy's name is. I have it handy here in a second, but it's Bjorn Denker.
Okay.
So we'll have to cross-reference him, maybe look him up.
It's not a Bath's name, is it? There's so many songs coming up that there's some stuff that sounds a lot like a Bath.
Very
ravishing grimness.
Yeah. Although, well, you hear a little bit more of that in the World Playground Deceit.
Yeah.
In a way.
I think it's just
Satyr does with his voice. So, but we're going to hear the opening number, which is Existence, which just has this like pummeling, like it's just like cyber black metal. I mean, it just sounds
but in a good way.
Yeah, it's razor sharp than the way that Rebel Extravaganza was.
Yeah, like it definitely has that metal. It takes the
cyber metal is bad choice of words. Sorry, I said that.
Anytime I just think of that Billy Idol cyberpunk record. But no, they take like that, the kind of like ferocity that you get from like a Ministry, later Ministry record or something. Not the crap they put on the last couple of years, but like Psalm 69 or Mind's a Terrible Thing to Taste. Like that stuff was like, it seemed dangerous at the time when you heard it. Yeah. And there's never any like, oh, this is like Skinny Puppy or something, dude, or any kind of like all this. There's no stigma.
Yeah, it was like the soundtrack to like the end of the world in a way.
Yeah.
but not in like a cheesy like Hollywood.
Well, it's just like what instruments can we use to really get our ideas across and not try to just like peg ourselves into we're black metal, so obviously we can't use electronics, but no, it's really artfully done on this record. Yeah,
and then so we're gonna hear Existence, and then World Playground Deceit, which has this incredible breakdown about 2.5 minutes in. That's where you hear a bathy kind of talking vocals, the Popeye vocals. And then we'll close things out with Stellar Master Elite, which we'll talk about that tune when we come back. So enjoy some solo Thorns.
what will you be? We can no longer tell. If you cease to exist, would we mourn or remember you? World, playground, deceit.
Stellar Master Elite, World Playground Deceit in Existence. There's kind of a nice rhyming pattern to those tunes.
For being a second language, it's not bad.
Yeah. And Stellar Master Elite, very Satyricon-y. So if you haven't heard Rebel Extravaganza from Satyricon, that was a kind of almost like a little flavor.
Yeah, and if you haven't, shame on you, because that's a fantastic record and totally underrated.
For sure.
Underrated.
I remember when we did the Satyricon podcast last summer, we talked a lot about that.
Mm-hmm.
Just how it was kind of sold short.
I think it's probably their best record, to tell you the truth. It's my favorite. I like it way more than Stavinia. As far as like it's their own sound.
Yeah, it's hard for me
and
to pick a favorite Satyricon. I don't know.
They've got their different eras, but I think as far as like if I
think Volcano's probably still my favorite, but
if I own one record, it would be that.
Really?
One of Satyrcon's records would probably be that one.
You've always been kind of the big defender of that record. I mean, you got me into
a lot of records.
You got me into that record.
Yeah.
So.
Well, here my thing is I listen to records until they make sense to me. If I don't get them right away.
Yeah.
And because when I was younger, I just like if I didn't right away get something, I just and not everything's to get, but
yeah. I mean,
I think there's something to
crap is crap sometimes.
Yeah, because I mean I'll throw on like for something recently. Well, like the new Paradise Lost that we got in advance of.
Yeah.
I probably listen to that thing like 30 times just because I'll sit at the art desk and I'll be doing work all day with that thing, going on. So I'm able to, I guess, dissect the thing more and pick.
Yeah.
More so than because I'm kind of curious to like anybody that writes reviews out there. How many times do you listen to an album before you write a review on it?
Yeah. As a former reviewer, I can say that like sometimes you can only get through 2 or 3 listens of a record because you don't really want to like get any deeper than it.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate because you're right, probably selling the band short in some level.
And not every band's worth listening to the band, things that many times, but
Paradise Lost has earned it. Immortals earned it. Thorns, Satyricon, these kind of bands have earned it because of their reputation and because of the quality of their songwriting in those years. I mean,
I don't go out and get like a Godsmack record and listen to it for 40 times just because I know there's got to be something there.
Yeah.
There are bands that have had a good track record, I guess, and
sure.
Never proved me wrong, but I guess back to Thorns.
Yeah, but I think
This is one of those records, though. I've had this since it came out.
Yeah,
and
every time I listen to it,
I listened to maybe 2 or 3 choice tracks back in the day, but now I listen to the whole thing all the way through.
And it works as like kind of a single vision of music. I mean, it really is the soundtrack to the apocalypse, as we're going to kind of be getting into in their kind of final set of music coming up here from this record, where it gets a little bit more soundtracky, I guess you could say.
Isn't it the name of that Slayer box then?
Was it soundtrack? Yeah. So my bad. I'm such a bad Slayer fan that it sort of like pours out of me sometimes. I don't even notice it. Saying. What's that?
I mean, that's just a good descriptor.
Yeah, there you go. But what you heard, like Stellar Master Elite, I guess when you talk about why is it such a Satyricon song, what kind of elements are you hearing in a tune like that make it distinct?
Those power chords in the middle that they just the stuff we hear a little bit later on, like in Volcano and even
Now Diabolical
and Age of Nero. Where it's almost like Satyricon now seems they're like the Queens of the Stone Age of black metal to me.
Totally,
and not in a derogatory way.
No, simple but like kind of triumphant. Like fun, like just straightforward kind of rock and roll kind of element to it. Turbo Negro, to some extent.
Musically.
Yeah.
That's a band I think we need to approach on this show.
I think we should pretty soon.
I mean, just do an Apocalypse Dudes show.
Yeah, that's a Hall of Fame record right there, for sure. Well, because I was thinking because Satyricon is on that Turbo Negro tribute record. I think they do. I know Queens of Stone Age does Dungaree High, Back to Dungaree High.
Yeah. I don't know if I even have that,
Really? I've got it. Satyricon's version is pretty sweet. God, it's going to bug me, whatever.
It's not Denim Demon or something, is it?
No, it's they changed the words in it.
Oh, they throw Satan or something in it, don't they?
Yeah.
I'll have to hear this once the show's over.
No, I'm sorry. Sorry to bring up too much Satyricon.
Hey, but they're Norwegian, so.
Yeah, well, but also, we're talking, Satyr is playing on these songs and singing on them, so I mean, it evokes that memory. But where we're sort of going next, and one other thing we were talking about while we were listening to that last set of music is, Hellhammer is so known for his kind of over the top velocity. I mean, his
precision.
Yeah, and his attack of the drums and how prominent that is in Mayhem and all the bands that he's sort of been a part of. I mean, even Arcturus to some extent.
Oh yeah,
him and the keyboards were like the big feature on especially Aspira.
He's like the most lush part of the production. Yeah.
Well, and then Garm would scream over top of that, and it was sort of the Beauty and the Beast kind of. The dichotomy. But what are you hearing on this Thorns record with Hellhammer? I guess that's kind of interesting to you.
I guess similar to kind of like how we talked about a couple weeks ago with Nathan's Madrigal, how they're playing really well, but they produce it like really harshly, and that's the same. It's a ballsy choice for you to bring in Hellhammer's known for his precision, his speed, whatever. He's got a certain sound and he usually plays with click tracks and everything sounds snappy and it's all there. Like listen to the new stuff he does on Doom of Warger.
Yeah.
But then Snorre and I guess Satyr, I'm not sure what Satyr's extent was to the production.
So he's a co-producer,
They bury it.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really kind of cool idea, and if you put just straight, really high produced Hellhammer drums on the top of this thing, I don't think you'd have the same feeling.
No,
I mean it feels more entrenched, like it fell into the music.
Well, and that adds to the industrial collapse, apocalyptic kind of thing, of how the composition is sort of set up in a way. It kind of reminds me in a sense. I mean, you brought up obviously Nathan's Madrigal, but it also reminds me like on. When you listen to like Anthems of the Welcome of Dusk, the second kind of full length Emperor record, the first few times you listen to that, you're missing so much because of how buried in it is, and there's certain parts like in certain songs where Ihsahn is doing some of the craziest black metal soloing I've ever seen, but I didn't know it until I saw a video of him playing the song, and I was like, why is this? His fingers are going everywhere.
Distortion.
It's so drenched in, and then that's what's going back. I feel like every time I listen to that record in particular, I pull something new out. Like there's more sounds that I'm getting out of it. So I feel like that's what's going on with Thorns. I mean, every time you hear this sort of stuff, Satyricon, Rebel Extravaganza, same deal. You're
and I think the more
things,
as we've talked about probably in the last 3 or 4 shows now, but the more different kinds of music you hear too, you go back and listen to stuff, the more you pull out, the more you'll notice. Yeah,
because you're almost trained to look for things that you weren't the first time you listened to it. 2001. So
yeah, I mean the album holds up just as well. 8 years later.
Sure. And this album we were talking about too during the break when we were playing music. Did very well from a critical standpoint. I mean, Terrorizer picked it as album of the year, which is no
back then,
small feat.
Terrorizer is pretty much the bee's knees as far as extreme magazines went.
Sure.
I mean, we had Metal Maniacs in the States and various zines, but as far as high profile, it was it was an interesting choice.
Yeah. So Thorns really kind of made its mark when it came out. Kerrang freaked out about it. Metal Hammer, various magazines around the world internationally. So, but we're gonna kind of close things out tonight with 2 of the more, I guess, atmospheric tunes, which I guess in a way recall elements of Aerie Descent, which we started the whole show off with. Underneath the Universe Part 2, we were going to play Part 1, but then as we were sort of listening to it, we realized just it's so ambient and almost...
It's a little sparse for the podcast.
Yeah, it's something that begs for you to go out and buy this record, sit down with headphones, turn the lights off, which I was telling Mark I used to do with these 2 songs, and just sort of lose yourself in the soundscape of it. I mean, it almost has like a Angela Badalamenti kind of feel to it. The guy who scored Twin Peaks.
Oh yeah.
And, Mulholland Drive, and it just unease. It's so ambient. It reminds me of the last tune on Shamir's Arcturus record that we talked about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Where there's this very much like, I don't know, just a cosmic sort of soundscape to it, but this is far creepier.
It's something that demands to be listened, like it demands your undivided attention.
Yeah.
Which I mean, music's kind of a constant fixture in my life. I'd like to be able to sit down more and actually just soak it in.
Yeah.
That's a great part of this podcast is we get to do that.
It kind of forces us to soak some of this stuff in. So.
And to pontificate. You know, sometimes aimlessly, but sometimes you get some pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, and hopefully you've enjoyed, you know, some of the stuff that we've kind of had to say tonight. I mean, Thorns, as it's almost as in the midst of like doing this show, I think Mark and I have both kind of discovered a new appreciation for not just this, you know, solo record, but even the older stuff. I mean, like it's almost like I had heard it, but I had never really like listened to it before. You know, I hadn't like sat down.
Kind of primitive as the recording is. There's pretty interesting ideas going on there for, you know, 1991 or whatever. Yeah,
I mean, there's this collision of sounds, you know, keyboards and electronics and all this kind of stuff. And you hear a little bit of that in our final song tonight, which is Vortex. It's a closing track of the record, and a good way to end the show. So we've got Underneath the Universe Part 2, which just, I don't know, a very unnerving tune. I dig it. And then Vortex, which is going to sort of close things out. So, you know, let us know about what you thought. You know, some of the controversial things we said at the beginning of the show about, you know, how much credit do we give Thorns? You know, what do you think about that question? You know, shoot us some ideas or thoughts on that, or show suggestions or criticism, anything like that. So shoot us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com, or check out the website, which is requiempodcast.com,
or go to our Facebook page, which is Requiem Podcast.
Yeah.
I think it's facebook.com/Requiem Podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that what it is? Okay. Well,
if not, you just look up Requiem Podcast, and you'll either see my solo account, your solo account, or the joint Mark and Jason account.
The Mark and Jason account.
And we've been getting really good feedback on there from people, so we really appreciate that.
Yeah, and we're always looking for show ideas and things like that. And then obviously look on the website for some links to some of these records that we put up there, which helps us out with show costs and things like that.
Yeah, they've been going into the editor's playlist sidebar.
Yeah.
So look at those every show. We'll put some new stuff up there, and that gives us a little bit of kickback.
Exactly. So for Requiem Metal Podcast, I'm Jason.
And I'm Mark.
Enjoy Underneath the Universe and Vortex.